Over the course of the last 2 years, the housing market has been hammered by a perfect storm. House prices skyrocketed in comparison to salaries as a result of extremely cheap loan rates. Because, as is frequently the case, the prices of houses in the United Kingdom appeared to be a one-way bet. People bought houses if they could secure a deposit that was large enough. The economy, however, began to deteriorate. Inflation skyrocketed and interest rates increased by a factor of 500%. The shock of the interest rate on a housing market that was already overpriced makes it difficult to imagine that house prices would not decline. However, with the exemption of a relatively slight correction, nominal housing values are still only 5% lower than their peaks in 2022. So let's have a look at 7 different reasons why the prices of houses did not drop any further. But in addition to that, there is a significant amount of uncertainty over what will occur in the future, particularly with regard to interest rates. The existence of inflation is one of the reasons why housing prices did not decrease. Assuming that inflation is taken into account, the price of a home has dropped by 15% since the beginning of 2022, which is a major correction. Inflation is usually taken into account whenever we discuss wages or gross domestic product. When compared to what's actually taking place in the market, nominal house prices are extremely deceiving. The fact that only a small fraction of homeowners have been compelled to sell their homes is the second reason why prices did not fall by a greater amount. This is despite the fact that mortgage expenses are increasing. As a result of the nationwide measure, mortgage payments for first-time buyers are climbing to levels that are comparable to those observed in the most recent 2 financial crises, which occurred in 1991 and 2008. There is still a very solid reason to believe that prices are inflated, and this is the reason why buyer demand has been so low over the course of the past 2 years. But if we compare the years 1991 and 2008, we find that the number of households that were compelled to sell their homes as a result of repossession was much greater. Price reductions were brought about by the dumping of houses onto the market, which was the primary factor. Compared to the previous time, there are 3 key differences. In first place, following the credit crunch, new restrictions regarding mortgages were implemented, which meant that prospective buyers had to undergo stress tests. This implies that a lender is required to determine whether or whether not you are still able to pay your mortgage in the event that interest rates increase, which was not the case prior to the credit crunch. At this point, interest rates have increased and stress tests have achieved some degree of success. The fact that people are paying a greater proportion of their income on mortgage payments does not mean that they are being compelled to sell their homes. Secondly, following the credit crisis, an increase in the number of people who obtained fixed mortgages with terms of 2, 5, or 10 years was observed. Therefore, during the course of the past 2 years, a significant number of people have been protected from the impact of increasing interest rates. Yet, there are still some individuals who will experience the shock of a higher interest rate on their mortgage in the coming months. However, I believe that the most significant issue is the implementation of stress tests, which have resulted in individuals being required to demonstrate that they are capable of paying bigger mortgages. The third reason is that our economy is, in many respects, different from what it would be in other countries. This is what I mean when I say we entered a recession at the end of last year, which resulted in a decrease in GDP. This past month, there was no growth. However, despite this abysmal economic performance, unemployment is close to reaching record lows. This is despite the fact that real GDP per capita is still lower currently than it was in 2019. It is true that the unemployment rate has increased over the past month, yet employment rates were higher than 10% in both 2009 and 1991. If there were a significant increase in the number of people without jobs, stress testing would become obsolete. Nonetheless, the rate of unemployment has been rather low up to this point. The overall job picture is not considerably hurting the housing market in the same way that it did in 2009 and the early 1990s. It's true that economic inactivity is relatively high, but this is not the case presently. The fourth reason is that when we calculate the impact of interest rates on disposable income, we frequently forget about alternative forms of financing that are significant to the housing market. This is a phenomenon that occurs rather frequently. An excellent illustration of this is the increase in interest rates that occurred between the years 2021 and 2023. This resulted in the typical homeowner having to pay an additional £600 per month to cover their mortgage, which is a significant demand side shock. The mortgage, however, is just one of many sources of financing. In recent years, we've witnessed a significant contribution that presents from friends and family have made to the home market. 47% of all home purchases in the years 2021 to 2023 were funded by it. A more difficult task to quantify is the acquisition of property by investors on behalf of institutions. During the past 10 to 15 years, the average deposit has experienced a significant increase, particularly in London and the South East. Some of the rise in the ratio of property prices to income can be attributed to the fact that a significant number of people have been able to overcome this obstacle with the assistance of their parents. Moreover, it is possible that there are a greater number of families with two incomes than there were in the 1970s and the 1980s. The question of whether or not this expansion of parental financing can be maintained, or whether or not it's hit its pinnacle, is an important one to consider. At some point in the future, will it ever begin to decline? At this point, it's important to note that rents in the rental sector have been seeing continuous growth in the cost of renting, which is higher than inflation. This is connected to the fact that individuals are working hard to enter the housing market. Because of this, a lot of people have to deal with extremely high monthly rent payments. Because of this, you will have a motivation to do everything in your power to attempt to buy and avoid paying rent that is becoming a waste of money. A good illustration of this would be the practice of obtaining mortgages with lengthier periods. The average age used to be 25, but today it's more likely to be between 30 and 40 years old. It's possible that this could result in an increase in the total cost of a mortgage. Nevertheless, it will make it simpler to obtain a mortgage in the first place. A sixth reason for the stability of house prices is that, despite a decrease in mortgage lending, there has been a relative shortage of houses coming onto the market. This means that prices have been kept high because there is a short supply of houses. They have even confessed that they have slowed down the sales of new properties because they do not want to see prices go down. This is because they are concerned about the market. The government has not been able to meet its targets for the construction of more homes, and overall, the number of homes built in the previous year was at an all-time low. There is a shortage of housing in the United Kingdom as a result of the country's growing population, which is one of the factors that contributes to the rise in house prices. However, it is noteworthy to notice in the year 2024, Zoopla is reporting a significant increase in the number of residences that are being made available for purchase. Currently, the supply is growing at a quicker rate than the demand, and this may prove to be extremely significant in the months to come. Over the past several months, we have begun to observe an increase in real incomes, which brings us to our seventh factor. Despite the fact that it's now very weak and is still primarily reversing some of the declines in real income that occurred in 2022, it's still encouraging a greater number of first-time buyers to enter the competitive housing market. For the past 2 years, we've only seen a slow decline in real prices, and these are some of the reasons that explain why this has occurred. However, what are the prospects for the pricing of homes over the next 12 to 24 months? Furthermore, considering that Labour is likely to win the election and has pledged to construct 1.5 million new homes within the next 5 years, will such a significant increase in supply result in a decrease in prices? However, there is evidence to suggest that increasing the supply of dwellings results in a reduction in prices that is less than what one might anticipate. It is possible that there may be some slower growth and some decrease in pricing, but it's not a significant factor. In the second place, I apologise for being a little bit cynical, but the promises made by the government to construct homes are almost never, if ever, fulfilled. In practice, it may be difficult to construct a large number of homes due to the lack of trained labour, a lack of land, and other factors. This is true even if the will and the money are present. Currently, interest rates have been the most significant factor in determining house prices during the past 15 years, and they will continue to be so in the future. According to a study conducted by the Bank of England, the significant rise in housing prices that occurred during the 2010s and early 2020s was primarily caused by the low interest rates that were in place at the time. The Bank of England conducted a research that revealed that a 1% increase in interest rates might, in theory, bring about a 2% to 20% decrease in the price of a home. This, of course, is contingent upon the nation and the state of the economy. On the other hand, the effect of interest rates is frequently time delayed by a considerable amount of time. In the 1990s, interest rates went up, but prices went down for the next 4 or 5 years. This is something that needs to be considered. Theoretically, despite the fact that the base rates have increased by 4% over the course of the past 2 years, there may still be some decreases to come as a result of the time delay impact. However, the most important concern is what will happen to the rates of interest. It would be accurate to state that this has been proven to be quite challenging to anticipate. The prognosis is still not entirely certain. I anticipate that they will decrease, but I had anticipated that they would decrease last year, and I believe that core inflation has been a little more obstinate than I had anticipated. On the other hand, there are other reasons why interest rates should be lowered. To start, there has been a significant decrease in inflation. The cost push pressures have been reversed on the market. Secondly, the rate of economic growth is extremely low. In the best case scenario, the real GDP per capita is practically unchanged. Furthermore, despite the fact that the inflation rate for services is still quite high, there is typically a delay in the response to a decrease in the headline inflation rate. When the rate of inflation reached 10%, pay was significantly behind, and employees only had the opportunity to negotiate their contracts once a year. Therefore, it's not surprising that there is a delay in time. Presently, however, headline inflation is decreasing, and the same delay is occurring in the other direction. On the other hand, I believe that workers in the UK will continue to have little bargaining leverage in the future. When they next come to negotiate their pay contract, the wage will reflect the fact that headline inflation is lower. In light of the weak state of the economy and the declining rate of inflation, it will be extremely challenging for the Bank of England to justify maintaining interest rates at a level higher than 5%. Real interest rates have already reached their highest level for 15 years, which is probably detrimental to the sluggish economic recovery. In the event that interest rates were to decrease to 4% or even 3%, it would unquestionably increase the amount of demand seen in the property market. However, even if there is a slight decrease in interest rates, it's still difficult to see a return to the extremely low rates that were prevalent in the 2010s. In addition, all of the other reasons that have contributed to the steady increase in housing prices have, in a sense, been exhausted. Despite the fact we put everything we have into purchasing a home, the majority of households will have a difficult time acquiring more financing in order to continue paying higher prices. This is because house prices are still fundamentally inflated. On the whole, the result is that it is extremely unlikely we will see a return to the skyrocketing property values that we witnessed in the decades prior to this one. The most likely scenario for the foreseeable future is that real prices will remain relatively unchanged or gradually drop. This is the case even if there is a significant economic shock. Last but not least, it's important to keep in mind that the property market is very territorial. London and the South East are the regions that have been most impacted by rising housing costs, and cities have experienced the most significant declines. On the other hand, prices have been on the rise in the north and over in Wales, which is less influenced by higher interest rates and hence has more affordable prices. On a side note, although it is difficult to anticipate a significant decrease in the cost of housing, I would really like to see a gradual decline in the cost of housing, because excessive housing costs have been the root cause of a great deal of economic and social issues. If you'd like to know more about how the housing market has destroyed the economy, then in this video, every single detail is discussed regarding the reasons why high house prices have caused distortions in the economy of the United Kingdom. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please remember to like and subscribe, and feel free to comment so we can continue the conversation. And as always, I'll see you on the next one.